A very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session on the theme Making India a Sourcing Hub for Electronics, Sub-Assemblies and Components for the World. The session will focus on highlighting India's past experience in the journey towards sourcing success stories from India and best practices from successful countries. The possible solutions to the challenges faced by the industry to realize its potential of becoming the preferred sourcing destination. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to our chief guest for the session, Shri Amit Yadav, Director General from the Directorate General of Foreign Trade. I would like to now invite Mr. Harish Krishnan, Vice President MAIT and Managing Director Public Affairs and Strategic Engagement, Cisco, requesting him to kindly make his welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, and once again, welcome to the MAIT Manufacturing and Telecom Summit 2021. It has been a very challenging phase for us. We planned this event a year ago, but then we thought we'd do it in better times, but nobody knew that we will probably do it during the height of the second wave in India. But we also wanted to make this opportunity to show how resilient India can be, and we can get over this challenge that we have. So this is a great proof to that. And thank you all very much for participating in today's event. We had a great opening inaugural session with the Secretary IT giving a very motivational talk. He talked about the great investments that India has been able to attract. India has always tried to be a major power in manufacturing for a number of years, but now it does look a bit more real than it ever was. This indeed seems to be a golden period for electronic manufacturing in India. At least it has got the greatest potential. The government has shown a great inclination to attract manufacturing by announcing a PLI scheme worth over $8 billion for across the ICT sector, and industry is also warmly reciprocating that. While the focus in the past has always been to attract manufacturing, attract big brands, I think the real opportunity is in attracting component ecosystem. That's why I'm very specially excited about this particular session, which is about making India a sourcing hub for electronic sub-assemblies and components for the world. When you track component manufacturing, it works both for India, Indian companies, and global companies. What happens when you get a component ecosystem is that you have value addition happening in India, number of Indian companies prospering and supplying this, and really adding up to the net economic multiplier for India. At the same time, it also adds a tremendous value to global companies, because if you look at many of the global companies, they've already de-risked in terms of their manufacturing. Most companies have factories all over the world, whether it is in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Mexico, or Ireland, and so on and so forth. They've got a number of places. But where there is still dependency on one geography is on components. And that is where every company is looking to diversify, look for opportunities wherever it exists, and therefore it provides a great opportunity for India. And some studies in the past have shown that some sectors in the component, India has some distinct advantage, and probably this is an area where one needs to focus and attract more industries there. I'd like to especially welcome Shri Amit Yadav, Director General DGFT, who's our distinguished speaker in the session. Mr. Yadav, I'd like to congratulate you and your esteemed colleagues for creating the state-of-the-art cloud-based trade facilitation app, which provides ease of access for importers and exporters. Your department also administers the remission of duties, taxes, export of products, which is very relevant to a lot of MAIT members, and it's been our privilege to have been engaged with you and your department to make this scheme a great success. One of the things that we also noted is in this current edition of PLI, there's a lot of focus on exports. We always felt that India for India is interesting, but India for the world is exciting, and that is where exports, I think, play a key role. This session that we have just now, we'll have the supply chain heads from global brands, EMS companies, Indian EMS companies, government decision makers, Indian and global sub-assembly companies participating. These distinguished panelists will dwell on these issues, provide insightful inputs, paving way for constructive debate. We hope at the end of the discussion, we learn from our global best practices, case studies, and solutions. I'm confident of an enriching discussion that will help India chart a course towards becoming a next sourcing hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harish Krishnan, for your warm welcome address and for setting the context for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my proud privilege to invite our chief guest, Shri Amit Yadav, Director General from the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, requesting him to kindly deliver his keynote address.
Good afternoon and welcome all of you for this session. And I think so for the whole theme of this organized by MAIT, which is the decade of telecom and electronic hardware for India. And I think so it's very topical and very, very important as we move. We have already proved in India the software strength and the software leaders, the country and its people have been across the globe. I think so now the time has come for the hardware also. And therefore, I would say it's a topical thing that let's move into the hardware, let's do the manufacturing in the country. And I think so in this regard, the scheme which has been talked about some time back, the PLI, that is the production linked incentive scheme, it is a scheme which has huge possibilities, and I think so with the time will tell that we've been successful. It's not only for mobile, it's for laptops, it's for components, assemblies, and so on and so forth. And I think so we, in fact, today, as a couple of hours back, we've cleared some projects under the committee for the components and sub-assemblies. So we've been working on this scheme, and PLI is not only in the IT and IT sectors, it cuts across various manufacturing. The whole idea is make in India, make for the world. And I think so with the flagship program the government had right in the beginning from Digital India, and then working in conjunction for the electronic sector and IT sector with the phased manufacturing program. And then on the theme of taking it forward by various other programs, we have reached a stage where we are now ready to come and bring in investments. And it's the right time also. And someone talked about resilience right at the beginning of this session. And I think so the resilient supply chain is a very important part of this whole scheme of things. We are aware that supply chain is vulnerable due to high degree of concentration of production bases. And we need to look at alternatives. And I think so India provides that right kind of location and right kind of incentives and right kind of ecosystem for those moving away from limited concentration of production base. Government needs to work, and government is working with the stakeholders to attain more resilient supply chains. And I think so the way we have moved in the schemes over a period of time, and in the way policy changes and directions have been done, all of that is showing the strength and is also showing the commitment of the government. Whether it's the changes in the ranking of ease of doing business, whether a special program for reducing compliance burden, all of that is part of those policy changes. And a couple of years back, for the digital and the electronic and hardware sector, specific policy guidelines came in, both from the two ministries, which are the key ministries for your sector, the Ministry of IT and the Ministry of Telecom. So we had a digital communication policy which came out, and we had the national policy on electronics which came out. And within that national policy on electronics, a specific focus was on the electronic system design and manufacturing. And that all of that is now what has been culminated into various schemes, policy, which would take it forward. Mr. Harish talked about the RODTEP scheme. The RODTEP is basically, I would put it very simply, it's zero rating of your exports for carrying out various duties and taxes, which are at present not limited. the GST is remitted, but other taxes which are outside the purview of GST are not remitted. So RODTEP will bring in that even those taxes and levies which when we export get carried with the export, those would be zero rated. And I think so in the coming couple of weeks, the scheme is already on. The rates are and the policy guidelines are work in progress. And in the couple of weeks, we would be out with the rates and the guidelines and the scheme design itself. So that will, I think so, be again a welcome step across sectors and including the sector which all of you are interested in. So I would urge all of you, the decision makers or people who put the whole thing into perspective and to ensure informed decision making takes place, that India is in the right resource, the right location for assemblies and components. And I think so why it's very important that it's also that the value addition which takes place, needs to be enhanced in this the assembly and subcomponents from the 7 to 10% to 30-35, and that's what we will be working on and that is the part of this whole discussion today also. So we have various sunrise sectors in the country, and we are now looking for others other than the electronic hardware and these sub-components and assemblies, but also looking at what are the futuristic things, and which I should say that MAIT has also brought it in its program, the design center, the centers for ensuring that India becomes also a destination in this aspect, and other sectors, including the diagnosis and repair of electronic hardware. So good times ahead. We welcome, and whatever policy support is required, we have an empowered group of secretaries which meets as often as required to clear on the PLI schemes and on various issues. So we would welcome and encourage all of you to have a hard think and look at promoting trade, enhancing investment, and improved connectivity in India. Thank you all, and I would love to be part in the sense these discussions which will take place to get a better sense of what are the issues and what are the challenges and how the panel comes up with ideas for the way forward. Thank you, and thanks once again.
Thank you, Shri Yadav, for the noteworthy keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to commence the panel discussion. May I now welcome our session moderator, Mr. Josh Fogler, Country Head and MD, FIH India, a Foxconn company. A very warm welcome to you. I'd also like to welcome our esteemed panelists representing Government of India and the industry. A very warm welcome to Mr. Richard Hopkins, Senior Vice President, Consumer Devices and India Operations Flex. Mr. Marco De Martin, VP Global Supply Chain, Cisco. Ms. Ashita Gupta, CEO, Smile Electronics. Dr. Sriram Srinivasan, CEO, Sirma Technology. Mr. Raghav Handa, Director, Business Development, Asia Pacific from HSBC. And Mr. Amit Bansal, Global Head Operations, Engineering and Supply Chain Technologies from Dell Technologies. A very warm welcome to you all. With these words, I would like to now hand it over for this panel discussion to our session moderator. Over to you.
Thank you, Samadhi, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody. And very happy to see many of you safe and sound at this time. As the world is going through this pandemic, we continue to wish everybody safety, at this time. So I'd like to thank MAIT and George for inviting me to moderate this session, and I wanted to convey my special thanks to Mr. Yadav. Sir, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your inspirational keynote address. I think As Harish said, I think this really tells the resiliency India has, in the face of this pandemic, the resilience of the leaders who are present in this call and beyond, and about the peoples, here in such a vibrant sector. So, with that said, today's session is, I think we have definitely a star cast joining us from different parts of the world. And so my role today is going to be moderating this session. We'll have a set of questions which I will ask the speakers, and my request to the speakers is to be specific in your responses, and so that the wealth of your knowledge and guidance comes out for this audience, which I think is very pivotal back to what Mr. Yadav has outlined as important, for India and this audience here. And again, just as a disclaimer, my comments here are to support MAIT and this outreach, and my own personal views, and not my organization. So just to set the context, I think the growth opportunity in India in this sector has been phenomenal, especially the last 6 years. As Mr. Yadav said, the FACE manufacturing program has sort of led the way, supporting Digital India. Now, coming to last year, with the launch of Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think we have now taken sort of a real shot in the arm into propelling investments into the country, across manufacturing and the development of the supply chain. And so Atmanirbhar Bharat, ably supported by PLI, has been sort of really been something which is quite fantastic in sort of propelling us as an industry, and driving the value addition across the supply chain. So with that context set, I want to open with Marco from Cisco with an opening question. And so Marco, thank you for joining us from Hong Kong, and thank you definitely for making the time. So in your global experience, can you throw light on the best practices adopted by leading countries to attract companies for sourcing from their particular countries or geographies?
Hey, first of all, Josh, thanks, and thanks to you and Harish and the rest of the MIT committee for inviting me to this very, very important forum. And let me take a second to congratulate MIT for the work that they've done over the past several years, and the several representative of the Indian government on this call, because I think the work that has been done over the year to grow the industry has been very, very significant, and it's something that is not easy. So I do want to take a moment to congratulate everybody for the progress we made over the years. In my humble opinion, what has worked for other countries has been, first and foremost, a step-by-step approach. And I believe India started with the right step, and the right step is enabling the EMS players to come first. The EMS players are the ones that are able then to grow the ecosystem of suppliers behind that, because a lot of it also matters in the industry proximity of supply for a lot of components that we use every day. So to me, the step of enabling first the EMS ecosystem, Harish knows it very well, and I had long discussion around this. I think that's been a great step in the right direction that's been made. I think the second step to me is a step. It needs to be. I always use this quote: "Rome wasn't built in a day." It takes patience to build the component ecosystem. And we got to start from the easiest of the commodity and ramp up. So to me, as having a very, very targeted commodity by commodity approach is important. And starting from the more mechanical commodities and build up the way to that. And I think there's some good progress I've seen in India being made on the enclosure side. I've seen good progress being made on the interconnect, the power. And those to me are the key commodity to focus first together with PCB and start growing the industry. There's not a need to jump directly to the more hardcore silicon commodities. I think you have to build capabilities and technology on a step-by-step approach. It was mentioned before, and I'm glad when I'm part of those forums and I hear, India for India and India for global, and I think that's pivotal to the success. We need to make sure that the policies are built to enable an India for global. Companies need to, in order to build a scale for what they produce, they need to have incentive that enable them to export component, because nobody nowadays, with the level of mix that every company needs to have in their portfolio to meet the customer need, people need to be able to produce a mix. So to me, that's the other very, very important part of growing the industry. And then one more that I think is important is the technology approach. Keep growing technology, keep protecting, helping companies protecting their IPs. And I think India is very strong on that one. So I think it's going to be easy for India to do that. But also understanding from the different suppliers and company what level of skills they need, and help those companies build the skill through university, through importing those skills in the country, is a mix of those of all those things. So, Josh, if you have to summarize it, those to me are the key things that I've seen as a success, and I'm seeing India in the right trajectory, and we just need to keep building upon it.
Thank you, Marco. I think you covered many points very quickly. I appreciate your guidance, and I think as you summarized well, I think Rome was not built in a day, and we got to start with the simple things and then build out. And thank you for acknowledging the progress India has made over the last few years, and it's going to be definitely stepping us in the right direction. All right. So from Marco, I'm going to jump to Richard. Richard is also joining us from Hong Kong. Richard, thank you for making the time to join us today. And the question, Richard, for you is, in your opinion, is the world eager to explore new supply chain sources, or is India too compelling to ignore?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Josh. And before I start, I'd like to thank the MAIT team for inviting me to this session, and very excited to join this distinguished panel with exchanging ideas and hopefully coming up with some good ideas as to the way forward. I mean, your question is a very broad one, Josh. I think absolutely the world is interested in exploring new solutions, new locations. I mean, what we're seeing at the moment, largely due to COVID, is a lot of pressure coming onto supply chains, and there's definitely a trend towards regionalization. We're seeing it with all of our customers. I mean, fortunately for Flex, we have a very well-developed global footprint, going all the way across the world. So we think we're in good position for that. But what we're seeing, and what we have seen over the last year, is more and more requests coming from customers to look at new regional solutions for manufacturing. Now, I don't know whether that ties in so strongly to the second part of the question, which is specific to India. But what I do think is India can play an extremely important role in, if you like, the global ecosystem of supply chains. There's definitely a need to explore new markets. I think India is uniquely placed in For example, its language skills. I think it's ideally placed geographically, so it's kind of closer to Europe, a little bit further away from the US, as everyone knows. And I think it's got the mindset at the moment, all the way down from the top of government, to become a significant player in manufacturing into the future. I mean, we've been in India now for just about 20 years. And I can tell you the first few years were tough. But what we've seen in the last 5 years, largely driven by many of the initiatives driven from the government, has been a significant increase in demand for India manufacturing. And that's a combination of manufacturing for the India market, but also manufacturing for export. So I think the time is right. I want to come back actually on something that Marco was talking about, which is the question of component ecosystems and component manufacturing. And I completely agree with Marco about being focused on specific commodities where we can make a difference quickly rather than sort of shooting for the moon. Because there's things there's phases which countries go through as they develop their industry. And a very popular comparison that's made for India is China, but China's been at this for 40 years. So it's unrealistic, I think, to expect that India gets to the same stages as China has got to, in a fairly short period of time. So what we've got to look at is what are the commodities that what are the commodities that by manufacturing locally in India will enable better supply chain solutions, so that for a company like Flex, allows us to offer a compelling manufacturing operation and supply chain for our customers. And just as Marco was saying, thinking about mechanical or electromechanical part interconnects, packaging, printed circuit boards can be there as well. I think that's where the focus needs to be. And what I'd like to see is more discussion between industry and the government about really targeted and focused programs around those particular commodities. The next point that I'll make is around talent, because I think there needs to be more development of vocational talent in India. I mean, what we've seen over the past 5 years since Make in India was launched is a lot of companies coming into the country and looking for the talent they need to run their operations, but finding that it's actually quite difficult. There's some extremely intelligent people in India, and your universities are graduating hundreds of thousands of engineers and managers every single year. But what's missing is the deep industry experience. And I think what we've got to think about is how can we put in place vocational education programs that increase the talent pool, so that as companies come in, they can more easily find the talent they need to be effective in their operations. Yeah, sure. So my point there is I think we need targeted programs around vocational education, so that we can be developing more of the engineers and the manufacturing professionals to allow companies as they come into India to have the talent available to them to be successful.
Very good, Richard. Thank you very much. I think so. Just to summarize, it's very heartening to see that the interest is in India. Programs like the PMP have helped sort of drive the growth over the last 5 years. We, of course, know Flex has been here the last 20 years, learning and scaling as goes. Appreciate your comments on the targeted components, very much like what Marco set the stage for. And I think I definitely appreciate your comments about the talent and how we should sort of grow the talent here. So thank you, Richard. So from Hong Kong, we move to Chennai. Sriram, I have a question for you. And so my question, Sriram, is how can Indian component manufacturers participate in new product design cycles and become future suppliers as the product goes into mass production? Your insights and views, please.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and thanks George, for having me. This is, I think, my first one in MAIT. So looking forward to that. Yeah, good question. I wish I had an easy answer to give. People before me already said it's not going to be built in a day. I think it's a long haul. But we at the ESDM side of things are working every day to get into design and design-led manufacturing. Of course, scale is an issue. Skills are an issue, and I think companies like we see today on the panel itself, their confidence in building stuff in India. I'll give you a short anecdote. When we go and talk to some of our global customers, I represent Sirma, and we already do about 85% of what we do for the overseas market. But still, when we go start talking to our European or US potential customers, we start talking about manufacturing in India, and it's polite conversation, it's good coffee, and that's about it. But when we start to talk about design, they kind of sit up and take notice. So I think that's where the sweet spot is for this country. We have to necessarily speak about design. We've got the talent, but we need hand holding. I mean, I'm not saying design is going to happen. The global majors are going to come in and do design of systems, subsystems in India tomorrow morning. But I think we have to open the conversations up around design, even if it is subsystems, subsystems today, very low end stuff to start with. I think that's the sweet spot that we have to start talking in our conversations. And then eventually at the end of that design cycle, can we also build something for you? Because once we have designed it, we are the best people who can build it. And I think showcasing the ability to manufacture good high quality stuff is something that we can showcase, but the path has to go through the design services. So that's quickly my take on what you're saying. I think I completely agree with you that the India story is compelling, not only because we have huge pools of talent, but also the Indian market itself is very compelling. So even if you just build it for the Indian market, it's going to be a big one. Because just to give you a statistic, when we looked at laptops and notebooks, India, the penetration is 15.4 per thousand, while China, it is 41. In the US, it's 781, per thousand. So you're looking at a market that's about to explode, and so there is definitely a compelling story to tell. So can we start designing for India before we start designing for the global entities? I really want to provoke my friends on the panel from Dell, Cisco, and the global majors to ask this question, simple question. Are you willing to take that punt? Are you willing to take that bet? Because we are here, we have been building stuff for Taiwanese companies, US companies. I think if you stop to look, I think you will find very good companies which have the right systems in place, which have been building for overseas customers. There are some sweet ones there in India as well. So that's the way to do it, Josh. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I think having myself launched a design services team about 5 years back in India, only because of these conversations we've been having, plus adding a quick prototyping to the whole thing, a dedicated line that does just prototypes, 5-10 boards, doing a lot of reference design building for big boys like NXP and TI and all the chip IC companies, chipset companies. I'm very confident that Indian companies can get started at least on that journey as the government support comes in. So that quickly is how I want to close my opening argument.
Thank you, Sriram. I think what you said about design and the roadmap to design, right, where you start to pick your battles and whatnot, and I think you also sort of thrown the gauntlet for some of the global guys to come here and partner with Indian companies to do this. So I think it's very important. At least I feel that design is one of the cornerstones of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and I'm glad you have brought that out. And I think there is nobody in this panel who will disagree with you, and I'm sure in the audience, everybody will definitely agree that India has a good broad base of talent, maybe even specific talent in the hardware space, apart from just the software space. So, and it's definitely something to build on. Many of the companies represented by the speakers here have some phenomenal centers already. So I'm with you on that. I agree. So thank you, Sriram. So from Sriram, I want to go to Bangalore, virtually, of course, and to Ashita Gupta. So Ashita, the question I have for you is sort of building upon what we had for Sriram. So how do you think small to medium-sized EMSs can attain scale in the shortest possible times? It can be Indian small-sized companies or multinational ones. But what is your view, Ashita?
Thank you, Josh, for giving me the opportunity to speak today, and thank you, MAIT, for giving us this platform. I think the way I look at your question, I would break it down into two different parts. One is on achieving scale. Two is how to do that quickly. Achieving scale, I think, really comes from what your customer needs are, right? So engaging with the opportunity, engaging the scoping of the environment. What is it that you need to do to create franchises that will propel growth in your industry, in your company? It really starts from there. And from the opportunity, you can really build on building the facility, building the skill sets, building the team, building the tools that are required to deliver on that requirement. Today companies talk about let's go get the biggest customer available, but really the question at hand is what do we need to do to leverage that, right? What kind of skill sets do we need? What kind of processes and systems do we need? And a lot of times, a lot of people ask us the question as to why can't we do what China did? But really the answer to that is, China created systems and processes to a level where it created Kaizen on a management level. Culture really was driven by how do we improve on a daily basis. They redefined waste management altogether. They said that we don't see why we can't run a lean organization with agile supply chain. And that's really what drives scale, right? Being able to change what is at stake, to be able to change what's given, on a daily environment basis to manufacturing industries, to achieve the requirement from the customer end and develop really 20x of what we're doing today. That will define how we achieve scale. The culture that leadership drives, being able to diversify at a board level for smaller organizations so that more global viewpoints are put to the table, that will define how we really scale up. And to answer the question of how quickly we can do that, it really is a matter of thinking on a 360-degree level. So, think partnerships, think leveraging stakeholders, think creating sponsors at each level of stakeholder, creating that kind of conversation that facilitates merit-based decisions, that facilitates building supplier partnerships and creating a common vision. I think speaking throughout, my 10 years at EMS, I know that creating a shared vision will drive what I call soul in the business, right? So unless you might want to achieve the best, but unless passion is there, you won't be able to bring out the best in people. So that's what my take is on this.
Thank you, Ashita. Thank you very much for breaking down how you want to tackle scale and speed. I especially liked what you said about about the culture, especially the small and medium enterprises taking bigger risks, but really being process driven about it. And so really appreciate the insight, because I think now is the time, for the small and medium enterprises to sort of have that level of ambition, to grow and sort of be this $5 trillion economy, which the Honorable Prime Minister has been sort of emphasizing. And so it's very happy to hear that. Thank you, Ashita. I'm going to mix things up a little bit. We have a banker in our midst, so Raghav, my buddy, is there. So Raghav, I'm going to put you on the spot, bring you in a little bit. So Raghav, as you see a greater degree, I mean, you heard from the speakers, everybody's talking about, how do we bring better localization in the sector in electronics. What is your view? Should there be, banks like HSBC in facilitating a smooth ecosystem, for build outs, and which is your view for efficient sources of funding, manufacturing setup, and ongoing operations of India?
I think thank you so much, Josh. That's a very interesting question, and I believe probably one of the most relevant ones again. See, I guess India obviously as a country has has a multitude of avenues to facilitate really to kind of facilitate market access for foreign investors into the country. Now, having said this, really given the fact that there are multiple options, I think it does require a very strong degree of decoding of what a softer landing, and that's really the broader narrative that we share within HSBC in India. I mean, as well as within India, and more importantly, the home sites from where these investors, from where these investors kind of originate, right? I mean, it's really facilitate a softer landing for our, for our global anchor clients, their EMS partners, and then really going deep down into the supply chain, right? So, I guess, and that's what we've been kind of working over the last few years very closely with the central government, with also state governments, etc. It's to really kind of join our forces, and to kind of enable platforms which breed inclusivity, which kind of breed, which kind of really help investors to be taking informed decisions, because while there are there's a very strong policy support, and there are various facilitators across the central and the state government, but then global banks and global service providers, I think there is time to kind of probably step up and step up as a strategic partner to really partner probably the progressive journeys that anchor corporates and anchor units stroke their EMS partners have in India. And when you kind of really talk about adding efficiencies, adding efficiencies is not only at an anchor corporate level, it's not only at an EMS partner level. One has to go down right up to a component level, and irrespective of the sizes. So for example, if there's a large US anchor corporate working with say 5 or 6 EMS partners in India, there is obviously value add that you can bring to the anchor corporate. There is value add that you can bring to the EMS partner. But if you really talk about a localization, one should really have the appetite to kind of get down to the supply chain, and then really kind of provide this handholding assistance, to all tiers of the supplier ecosystem. So with that as a broader unified narrative, and obviously been working with, as I mentioned, very closely with state and the central governments, a few things that we've been kind of doing in this is really to have a practical lens when it comes to execution. So in fact, Josh, you've also been witness to some of them. So just to give you one example, and for the broader audience, when it comes to investment in India, I mean, it's it kind of really involves decoding the financial landscape. It really means getting together along with the anchor corporates, sharing a shared vision, and then more importantly, supplementing the efforts of the anchor corporates stroke their EMS partners, to really facilitate a softer market access, for their supplier ecosystem. And the point that I was really trying to mention is, the way to kind of do all of this, and in fact, a few of the ways that have been, working for a few, like large anchor corporates across US, Japan, Korea, and, the EMS partners, I mean, is by by kind of really joining our forces to kind of help decode help really decode or what kind of investing in India what kind of investing in India is really like, and also support them or maybe support the wider sector really by coming in with probably on a need be basis, but then kind of leveraging our own presence and network with the government, international business chambers to kind of support the sector really with policy advocacy. Just coming to the second part of the probably second part of the question, which is really in terms of financing manufacturing setups, probably financing manufacturing setups in India. So here again, I mean, at a probably at a very high level, there are two broad sources, right? So one is obviously equity and debt, and then within debt you've got multiple sources of parental finance as well as bilateral finance. Now, obviously, everybody understands that India, that India as a country, I mean, India as a country is obviously a very high interest rate economy. There are, and please do speak to your bankers. I mean, I'm sure your finance colleagues would be doing that. As and when you plan for investments in India, it's important to involve your own bank early in the decision making life cycle, and to choose probably a judicious mix of or probably what a capital structure could really look like. The only point that I would really want to mention here is that there are a multitude of options available for financing your import of plant and machinery, for financing your purchase of land, without really getting into a cash trap situation, and also kind of having structures that kind of insulate you really from an FX fluctuation standpoint. The second state of financing, I mean, is really, the second state of financing is really in terms of kind of, as and when you kind of start, or, maybe as and when you initiate operations, there again, suppliers which kind of come in, they will obviously be needing financing from a capex standpoint, but as and when they graduate in their journey in India, they, there are solutions I think available with all the banks in India in terms of structured supply chain solutions. My only request to the audience here is that please do speak to your bankers and involve your bankers early in the day, so that they can kind of come out with structures and then help you to kind of avoid yourself in a trap situation in terms of getting into a high interest rate setup. Secondly, having having structures and solutions to kind of support you with FX insulation, and the third really being that wherever possible and you are raising foreign sources of funding, I mean, you are bringing foreign sources of capital both on the equity side as well as on the debt side. I think there are kind of structures available which kind of allow you to finance your plant and machinery, which is indeed almost 50% of your overall capex, or maybe slightly more than that, through foreign sources. You will not need to get into situations where you'll have to convert those rupee, I mean, probably convert those dollars into rupees, and then once again kind of really kind of converting those rupees back to dollars. So I think I'll probably maybe just stop there, and happy to take up any questions as there would be. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Raghav, for I think you just ran through a beautiful blueprint, and I appreciate you taking the time doing that. I really like the part where you, if I can paraphrase that as the global value chains, starting right with I think anchor corporate is the word you're using. I think we have a couple of anchor corporates here. At least we have Marco, here with us, and the EMS partners and the component players who sort of follow up, and this blueprint which you're talking about for the entire global value chain to be structured, getting the banks involved ahead of time, so that both capex or working capital requirements are met. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's very, very important, in a country like India, to do so. So, thank you very much, Raghav. Just before I go to Marco, just wanted to make sure that I'm not missing Amit from Dell. Amit from Dell. Okay, so
yeah,
I think
Josh,
he's not here.
He has not been able to join us from Singapore, so you can continue. If he joins, I'll let you know.
All right, cool. Thank you. So I'm going to come back to Marco. So Marco, the next question I would like to have your insight or your vision. I mean, do you think over the next 5 years, will India be conducive for volume-driven components or value-based supply? What is your advice? What is your thoughts on this, Marco?
Josh, thanks for asking this. Before I address that one, I do want to pick up, if you don't mind, very quickly on a couple of comments that were made because I thought they were very, very relevant. The comment made by Ashita is very, very much true and something that at time we don't stress enough. So Ashita, I was very pleased to see your comment around culture, around the right leadership. And that to me is important. Ultimately, businesses and factories and supply are run by people, and people that run it, the GM of a factory will make a huge difference on the growth of that environment. So a lot of time we tend to forget that. So I'm very pleased you brought that up. And then the other point, Josh, that you made when we talked about R&D and development, there are many companies, and Cisco were one of those, that we have large development center. We have a development center with 15,000 people in Bangalore. Is our largest development center outside of San Jose, which is our headquarters in the US. So you're very much true about our investment. Those are investments that started very, very long time ago, and which we are particularly proud of, in all honesty. To answer your question about volume versus what you call value, I say it's a mix of both. It's not either or in my mind. And the reason why I say it's a mix of both is obviously the first set of key development that in terms of production has been the cell phone going into India, and those has been drastically growing. Thanks to the right incentive model and thanks to, in my opinion, both the way that the government has leaned in, as well as a demand being there, as well as the large EMS player have leaned in those conversations. So to me, that will attract by nature a volume ecosystem for component just to support that type of production. But that doesn't mean that you cannot do higher mix, low volume, and more value, and at time more value. I think there is this concept out there that just because it's high volume, it might be low value. I'm actually a believer that the world has changed on us over the years. The consumer products are more complicated than ever, and the technology inside of consumer product is potentially at time higher than in a lot of other products. So I would say it needs to be a mix of both. You need to ride the wave on what's present right now. So I would ride the wave of the volume at the moment, but don't forget about the higher mix, because that's sort of what's going to be able to build the next set of the ecosystem. So to me, it's a phase approach. Josh, hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think definitely echo your sentiment, Marco, on that. And anyway, Cisco has been in the country long, investing across the value chain. So, and kudos to you guys, and hopefully you do many more things across this value chain. But I like what you said about how do we mix this up, and then what is the roadmap to achieve that. So, very good. So I'm going to still hover around Hong Kong, and maybe a question for Richard. So Richard, the question I have for you is, what critical changes would the EMS companies need in India to become the sourcing center for sub-assemblies and possibly components?
Okay, I mean that's definitely a complex question, because there's many things. I think a lot of what the government of India are doing at the moment around incentivization through the PLI is going to make a difference. I think it needs to be more targeted than it is at the moment. A lot of the emphasis around PLI, the various PLI schemes are targeted at large, to coin a phrase or to use a phrase that's being used already, anchor companies. I think there needs to be a broader net cast at component companies. That is going to, in combination with the work that the companies like we will do, and I know your company as well, Josh, are doing, we can have the pull and, if you like, the push, or the pull and the pull. The pull coming from the industry and the pull coming from the government. So I'd like to see more targeted incentive schemes for components. A lot of it is driven, I think, by, in the EMS world, what our customers need. And our customers will come and they'll say, well, we need an India solution. So partnering with our customers and convincing them of the benefits of shifting some of their component manufacturing into India. And then for the EMS companies to demonstrate what is possible, and to work to develop those companies that are coming in from the manufacturing side, or from the component manufacturing side, I think is also extremely important. But I'll come back to what I said before, and it's a theme that was touched on by others. I think it needs to be targeted, not just in terms of companies, but around commodities. To my mind, every economy, as they develop manufacturing ecosystems, have got to learn to crawl before they can walk, and walk before they can run. There are constraints, I think, in India at the moment around infrastructure, which is going to make it very difficult if the focus is on, for example, the high-end semiconductor fabs, as an example. And I think there's a lot more value that can be generated by moving down the complexity scale and targeting the more electromechanical parts, and then gradually moving up into electronic component manufacturing. So I think it's all about targeting. It's all about focus on particular areas where the benefits can be maximized in the shortest possible period of time. And that's a combination of incentives, it's a combination of partnering with EMS companies, and it's also a question of understanding where India can be successful with which commodities in the shortest period. And that to me means you kind of move up the complexity scale rather than shooting for the moon.
Richard, I believe that's a very practical, pragmatic advice about, and I think your advice, your recommendation about PLI being more targeted to commodities, I think component commodities, I think should be taken up with the government. So really appreciate.
Maybe I can just come back on one other point, Josh. Sorry to interrupt. Maybe I can just come back on one other point.
Sure.
The key to developing industry and the component ecosystem is for India to figure out where the stickiness is. You and I both know in our businesses where we're doing printed circuit board assembly, we can ramp up and we can ramp down fairly quickly. The equipment that we bring in can be moved out again. The key to getting the stickiness is to incentivize people who find it difficult to move their investments out of India. And that a lot of that is in the component space. I mean, you think about injection molding as an example. I mean, I could also talk about semiconductors and other more complex products, but I'd be contradicting myself if I did that. I think targeted incentive schemes which encourage component manufacturing in areas where there's reasonably high levels of capital investment is the way to go to ensure that stickiness.
No, I think I will not disagree with you, Richard. That I think it's and I think it's I know Mr. Yadav, I think in his wonderful opening remarks, sir, you had mentioned about welcoming broad-based. I think Richard's point. And Marco's points, I think both are really asking us to focus in a way, our efforts towards, certain commodities, certain categories. And I love what Richard said about why don't you bring in components, which cannot be moved out easily, right? Stickiness. Sir, would you mind giving any comments on what Richard
I think so. What was said, and my understanding is that yes, what was talked about was targeted incentive schemes for components where there's huge capital investment. And I think so the production-linked incentive scheme has components specifically with regard to assemblies and components, beside obviously the mobile manufacturing and also the laptop and notebooks and so on and so forth. So there are provisions, and we have sufficient funds even now available. We had 2 rounds of application inviting, and we just completed, as I said, today with regard to components manufacturers scheme approval. We cleared hopefully 16 of them. So we still have funds for more people to come in, and we'll have another 3rd round of application. We would encourage people to have a hard look at the scheme and look at what value it can bring to you. And I think so one important point somewhere in the discussion was with regard to the availability of skilling and sufficient skilled labor and at all levels, I think so. That is a part of the Skill India mission, and also as part of the policy in of the national policy of electronics, where we are talking of continuous HR development. I think so we'll work on that. Those are very key indicators. On the design, one of the comment came on the design also, and I think so on the design, India has shown strength, and there are global companies which are getting designed here. And those are basically outsourced design. The design happens here, and then it goes back, and it's across the manufacturing sector. And there are huge opportunities there, and there is a very talented pool of people around the design. So with the right kind of stimulus and the right kind of interest, that can further grow. So that's one sunrise sector we need to look at, the design part of it. I also just want to put in, and this was recent, I think a couple of days back, the report which came out, it said that among the emerging market tracker, India is now at the top. It's on the various rating, whatever is done by this organization on what is the emerging market tracker. India is now at the top. It's taken over from China on the various indicators. Obviously, it's a feedback from the people who matter, independent organization which has done it. So there are opportunities, the policy is there, and we are working not for a short term. And as I heard from various speakers, these are step by step, building on blocks, building as we go along. And I think so that has held us stay good over a period of time. We would encourage further deliberations, further suggestions to how we can look at some in the time to come, either in the short term, medium term, and also in the long term. Thanks.
So thank you so much for, first of all, being here with us, despite your very busy schedule amidst COVID. But we definitely appreciate the drive which the government is driving, especially your officer, I think, has been doing some phenomenal drives, to propel this industry. And your feedback about design, which echoes with Sriram brought out, is also key. And so we'll continue to work with you, sir. And as a part of MAIT, we will work with you and your team to see how we can bring this component ecosystem, the right component system, which have the right stickiness, into India, and then build on from there. So thank you, sir. So with that, I'm going to move to Sriram. I think, George, please flag me if I'm doing doing bad on time. Sriram, India is in the cusp of taking manufacturing to the next level. I think there are many indicators, which are proving, that we are reaching that. With that comes challenge in driving skills, and I think many of the speakers, Marco has brought that up, and Mr. Yadav has also echoed that. What steps? And you're somebody who's dealing with very high-end talent. What steps need to be taken to prevent a likely shortage of skills?
No, thanks, Josh. I think that's an excellent question. There's no shortcut to it. The shortest cut is to poach people, but that's not exciting, right? So the way to do this is to go to the grassroots level. And I can speak from personal experience in my own company in the last 6 years. We have, and you probably heard about this, know a little bit about it also. We go to the villages, we pick up these boys and girls. We actually put them through skill development. We have a very active skill development center. We wrote a book on how to skill up these people, right from rudimentary safety and environment skills to, hand skills, finger dexterity, everything, and teaching them something about electronics, components. And there's no shortcut. I mean, it takes at least 15 days to even put them in the shop floor next to a trained operator, and getting them to do very basic stuff like soldering and things like that, but very basic soldering, not the high end stuff. So this is one way that we can bring people at the grassroots level and move them up. So we have a very active grow from within program. If we bring in, say, 500 people, we have typically 15 to 20% of the people, already in the focus groups after the first 2 months. We spot talent and we put them in what is called the focus groups. And then that focus group is looked at very, very carefully on a day-to-day basis, right from what Ashita said, culture, attitude, to, ability to do stuff, think on the feet, and I have a very simple test. When I walk through the shop floor, any girl or boy making eye contact with me and holding that eye contact for a while means that, he knows he or she knows what they're doing and what they're talking about. Otherwise, if they're just kind of moving away and looking the other way, I know they're shy and it's going to take a longer time to get them up. Having said that, that's at the basic level. We also have a very, very active recruitment of the colleges. We go to as many as 40 colleges in Tamil Nadu, engineering colleges, and then we shortlist something like 900 people, out of which we select about 10 to 12 every year. And these are the elite program. We don't give them anything to do for the first 1 year except for doing projects. We set them up in the first 3 months. We send them off to Tuticorin for a special training, bring them back, and then they have to work on projects which are absolutely impossible to get a result. But along the way, they learn a lot of stuff. So these are high risk projects that we wouldn't dare to put our people, regular people on, but we give it to these young kids. And then at the end of the year is when we actually assign them a department as per what they want to do, where they want to go, where they want to work, because they have a very good idea of the organization. Plus, we also have the growth from within, which is feeding into this whole system. So we are building the next leadership pipeline. I know the question that comes to everybody's mind is, if you have 10 people coming in every year, plus you have another 20% of the 500, 600 people that you are, what if they leave? Yes, I mean, that's a definite attrition, and getting poached by other EMSs is a definite challenge that we face. But the way we have, right at the beginning, what we decided is if some of them just go away, they're going to be ambassadors for us. Down the road, they're going to come back to help us in many ways. They could be in positions and they're going to remember us because we set them up, we gave them wings to fly. So that's the approach we have taken. So it's not a one-day thing. It's constant. Some of the people that I remember recruiting in 2016 are just coming up to a level where they're really contributing in 2021. So it takes a gestation of 3 to 5 years before you see results. But if you're patient, I think we talked about patience in many of the panelists spoke about patience. And I think one place where you really need patience is with people, and skilling. And it's a 7-year project. That's what I keep telling my HR guys. It's a 7-year project to get a good engineer on the shop floor, and you have to stay with him. We have more girls than boys, so sorry for the bias, but that's the way it goes. Because 90% of the elite GETs we recruit are girls anyway. So that's doing a little bit for the nation and also for ourselves.
I think
that's a quick answer, Josh.
I think it's and thanks for packaging that very crisply, Sriram. And I think it's very heartwarming to see what you do. And I think it also tells the global value chains, that if you approach the talent, in a very structured, respectful manner, you can build this. And I think, I could see Ashita nodding her heads, Richard nodding his head. I mean, people have done this in India, over years, acknowledging what you just said. And I fully echo your sentiment, in this. It's definitely, people say Skill India, and I think this is Skill India in action. And I think those are great examples, great practices which you've shared. And I hope the audience will definitely find it useful. So switching from that, maybe I'm going to put George on the line. I think so. George, you've been hearing, from global value chain leaders like Marco, global leaders like Richard, local champions, here. Of course, we had the privilege of hearing from Mr. Yadav. So, George, what do you think, is missing today? What will bring things together? What sub-assemblies, what components, what is going to be sticky? Are the PLI schemes, sort of on the mark, off the mark? What are your views, George?
Thank you, Josh, for that question. One of the things about supply chain folks, I always tell people, is that they are the most precise people because that's their world. They have, a marketing guy can afford to fail, a sales guy can afford to fail, but a supply chain person cannot fail. So in that sense, I'm very glad that we have these leaders here. And in fact, they are very measured people. So everything that they say, there is a lot of wisdom that goes behind it. Now, as was mentioned by multiple speakers, Rome was not built in a day. It's a journey that we have to walk. India has phenomenal advantages which we have to mold, So we have our demographics, we got our large domestic consumption base that is there. We have our technical pool of manpower which is there, and that's what we have to take to our advantage. But then, having said that, electronics demands high precision, high consistency, and that has to work in a program manner. The other thing which I just want to mention is that, Shri Amit Yadav also mentioned this, that you have products which give about 8 to 10% value addition, then you got sub-assemblies, then you got the discrete components, and then you got the design part of it. And very clearly, these are different industries. Each is different. If I were to take discrete components, I would call them a chemical industry. And if I talk of sub-assemblies, then I would talk them of designing for a product and then their manufacturing, which is there. And these are not vertically integrated. It's not that what you call one particular company does the product and the sub-assembly and the component. And as was pointed out by Richard, we have to target which areas we as a country will focus on, and specific to, because the requirements of a product company is different from the requirements of a sub-assembly company. And we have to come out with schemes and supporting enablement that is required for that sector. So this, Josh, is, so we are on that journey. I see the government, already has done the first layer, which is in terms of attracting large product manufacturing into India. Next, they are looking at components, as he mentioned. And, I also want to use this platform to say that, look, we in India tend to dismiss assembly, saying that, it's just assembly. But what we need to understand in this world is any value addition is value addition and creation of wealth. And it's a series of such steps that eventually makes that final product, So we welcome this. We welcome sub-assembly manufacturing or assembly, and we will welcome component manufacturing. And that's the way we should work. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, George. I think I think we heard a lot of things. So I'm going to now use this opportunity to bring this to, bring this wonderful session to a wrap. So I'm going to request all, the speakers to use 1 or 2 minutes to sort of give in some kind of closing comments. And I would suggest that, you're addressing a wide array of industry people, government folks who are working tirelessly to build the country. What would your advice be as we in India try to build a solid component sub-assembly ecosystem? What would your closing thoughts be? And I'm going to probably put Ashita on the spot. I'm not picking her because she's the youngest, but maybe Ashita, you can set the context for some of us as you conclude your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Josh. I think it's very nice of you to have chosen me to set context for all of you large, global giants. But I think in my view, the most important is an outward look in terms of business. A lot of people miss this. It's easy to kind of go through a checklist and say quality requirements done, compliance requirements done, funding requirements done. But all of that needs to really come together comprehensively, irrespective of which sector you work in, to drive scale, to drive customer retention, and to understand what the need is of the hour. So really, please understand the markets that you're in, understand what it means to drive a P&L. It doesn't, mobile phones, EMSs all work on a very low margin end-to-end system, but that doesn't mean ROIC can't be achieved. So really understand what your market says, understand and hear what your customers want, understand where the global ecosystem sits, what the geopolitical situations are, and kind of bring that in, tie that in with your working on a day-to-day level. Please work with, there are multiple avenues created, even through industry associations like MAIT, and the government today is more open than ever in having a conversation. So use all of that to your strength, and hopefully we'll be able to drive and fructify the success story of growth in India.
Wonderful, Ashita. Thank you so much. I'm going to see Raghav. Can you give your parting thoughts, please?
So I think, this sector is obviously a very high priority sector, and we are obviously seeing. I think it's great to see a lot of localization, and I think it's also good to see a shift. In thought processes, and obviously supported by a policy tailwinds of this not only being now limited to only make in India for India, but obviously make in India for for the rest of the world. It's while obviously we kind of saw the mobile manufacturing space where I think the PLIs have been a very sweet spot in, in terms of kind of incentivizing local manufacturing, and then, and then probably also helping in terms of a migration of, I think, a reasonable part of the global value chains in India. And, but it's equally kind of pleasing to see. And, that's where, when we speak to, the global headquarters of our global anchor club, of our global, global anchor clients and EMS partners, I think the sentiment that they have in terms of investing in India, and I think, especially where now, the way India stacks up in terms of kind of bringing down the disabilities, vis-a-vis some of the other competing countries. I think so I think that obviously goes a very, very long way. I think from an overall disability gap of about 12%, I think the disabilities are probably down to about, probably in the range of about 6 to 8.7, close to probably like 9%. The other piece I'll just maybe want to kind of comment upon is that, and I've heard a lot of, probably panelists kind of talking about this, I think, is the need for skilling. This being a priority sector indeed for HSBC, and I think that's a shared vision, by probably by a lot of other players in the same industry. So we've kind of successfully completed our 5-year Skills for Life program, which kind of started in 2015 and then ended in 2020. I think we did invest close to slightly over 100 odd crores, through probably through 79 NGOs. We are going to be starting with the next phase of the skilling program effective 21st of May. Now, ESTM as a sector, so when I kind of talk about creating efficiencies, and I think, to the earlier point that you had raised, Josh, in terms of the role that banks, are playing, or rather should play. So it's not only about aiding foreign investments in the country, but it's really, with a holistic view in terms of sector development. And I think there, the role, through the CSR departments, through the CSR department, that organizations like us have been playing. I think it kind of just talks about, the overall, probably a very strong intent to kind of help the sector grow, probably in our own limited ways. But I kind of just wanted to kind of call on that, yes, ESTM sector is going to be a priority sector, for this next 5-year program that's going to be, starting from, that's going to be kind of starting from 1st of May, and we will kind of continue to support the sector through various NGOs, industry bodies, and and probably anchor anchor units as well. Yes, so I think with a few other PLIs, I think, on board, and a few other PLIs awaited, right from IoT variables to hearables, PLIs in white goods, consumer, the consumer electronics. We're obviously very closely tracking the PLI for IT hardware as well. So yes, I think any support that we could probably be of, we'll be very happy to kind of support anchor units and the CMS partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghav, and I think you brought out a very good point about the CSR, which is, sort of brings the community into the scheme of things as part of our culture. So thank you for the great work you do. I'm going to request Sriram, followed by Richard, and with Marco. So Sriram, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for this. I think, I'm sorry, I may be belaboring the point on the compelling India story, but I just missed one thing to say when I was talking previously. India is going to become security sensitive, extremely security sensitive going forward. So it's not just about penetrating the market, compelling India story, but it's also right from toll tags to set-top boxes. India is going to say, if you want to sell in India, better make it in India. We want to know what you're putting into the box or putting into the tag. So which really means, I'm again provoking the global majors that you have to come to India, and it's not easy to come to India just like that. So you need partners like ourselves. So I think this is the window of opportunity for all of you. Forget building for the global market, that will eventually follow. But I think the Indian market is going to get very sensitive about security going forward. And so please take this message back to your headquarters please plan to be in India, to make in India. Don't think it's mundane products that you're making. Even the most mundane of projects is going to be make in India going forward. So that's the only closing remarks I wanted to leave everyone with from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriram. Richard?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So maybe I'll start out by looking backwards a little bit and then look forwards. And I think it's important to think about how far India has come. When I think back over the 10 years that I've been involved in manufacturing industry, the development has been outstanding, particularly in the last 5 years. I think the 3 points I'll make, though, as we look forward, India's made great progress, but it needs to keep going, and it needs to keep going with consistency. The ease of doing business in the country is significantly better than it used to be. There's more consistent policies, but there's still some doubt when I talk to people about coming into India for manufacturing as to whether things are going to change again. So I think there has to be a consistency in the direction to follow through on what all the great progress that has been made, particularly over the last 5 years. And then the other 2 points are, as we discussed throughout the call, let's get targeted. Let's understand where the incentives need to go and target those areas that are going to have the biggest benefit for the ecosystem of suppliers. And lastly, again, a recurring theme, talent. We've got to focus on talent. With the plans that exist and the objectives that have been set for growing component and other manufacturing industry in India, we need more talent, and it needs to be good vocational people. And I love what Sriram described about the programs that they have running in his company, but we've got to do more of it. That's pretty much it, Josh. Thank you.
Wonderful, Richard. Thank you. Marco?
Hey, picking up on Richard, I love your comment on consistency, because I've heard that also many, many times, and that's very much true, in particular if you're a company having to place large investments. So I can totally align with that. I think a lot has been said, so on top of agreeing with everybody else, I'll add I'll add 2 more things, Josh. One is the ecosystem. And if you compare what countries that have been successful in doing this have done, they've created ecosystem in certain areas and not spread all over a country. So I believe India also has that big decision to make in front of them. I think what creates the stickiness that Richard has referred to before is definitely the capital, but is also those ecosystems that creates in the specific areas of a country, to which you find very, very difficult to pull out. And for many reasons, the reason is talent, capabilities, the ease of doing business, just having everything very much connected, and the ability of finding everything and not having to fly everything around the world. And that nowadays it makes a big thing. So one of my suggestions is stay focused on some geographical area and don't spread the incentive around the country, because India is such a large country. Stay focused, build one ecosystem after the other and keep moving around, but build it around that concept, which I think has been successful in China, has been successful in other countries around the world. Talent has already been touched. The only one, no, we need to, great progress and be made on the PLI scheme, which was great to see. One other thought on top of that one to me is the deemed domestic status is also very, very important for many companies on top of the PLI scheme. So, and on closing, once again, Josh, thanks for moderating the session. You've done a fantastic job switching around with question and getting all of us to think through this.
Oh, Marco, really appreciate your comments. I think, and allow me to thank everybody in this panel. I think everybody put their guards down and really focused on how we can help build this interesting country, India. There are geographical challenges, which all are getting fixed. And I think all your recommendations, guidances for this audience, I think has been unguarded, and I really appreciate everybody for really giving the right direction, which I think is very, very pragmatic and practical. I especially want to thank Mr. Yadav for his leadership in the government in DGFT, despite all the challenges the government is facing, and for MAIT for your leadership, your continued leadership in creating, recreating, and I liked what one of the speakers said. We have to. I think Richard said that we got to continue to build on India, maintain that consistent growth, and not stop or pause. As we attract global value chains, which will bring sub-assemblies components into India. So thanks again, everybody. Please be safe. Please take care, and let's showcase the resiliency in the supply chain despite this COVID times. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Josh. May I request Ashita to give
Thank you,
the
Josh.
vote? Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, George. Well, first of all, thank you so much for stimulating this conversation and for creating an understanding of what could be, the next steps that were required to build this country. I'd like to join Josh in thanking Mr. Yadav in, giving, first of all, working behind the scenes to create policy incentives for the country, but also being so forthcoming and encouraging the industry to grow. I'd like to thank Josh himself for being such a great moderator. I mean, thank you for pushing us to be specific in our responses and acknowledging things that really resonated throughout the panel. Thank you everybody on the panel, including Marco, who recognized opportunities in growth and value systems in the country. Richard, thank you for advising the industry on what's required and commodity-specific growth, creating stickiness in component manufacturing. Sriram, thank you so much for touching upon the design need and understanding that design is critical to building ecosystems, but also on working behind the scenes on building wealth in skill sets and how that is totally relevant to today's conversation. Thank you, Raghav, for participating and helping us understand how banking systems can work with us and how we can work with you or work with the banking industry in India to create better options for us, especially with Forex transactions. Least of all, thanks a lot, MAIT, for creating and hosting this panel, and all of the audience who participated and heard us. And if you have any questions, I'm sure MAIT will catalog everything we have to say and catalog all of your questions to create that conversation. So thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.